Icelocked here with Nocturne Gaming, back with more Valheim, and today we're taking a look at the combat mechanics. Throughout Valheim, there's a ton of different enemies with different weapons and damage types. So I'm going to go through a few of the mechanics to help make combat just a little bit easier for you. The first mechanic to talk about is stealthing, or as it's called in Valheim, the sneak skill, and to sneak you need to crouch down. This will open up a few new UI features, but to get into that we need to look at the skill itself first. So if you look at the skill, you'll notice that it reduces the stamina drain while you're sneaking. However, it also affects the visibility range of enemies near you. This is indicated using the white bar in the middle of the screen. There's two parts to the visibility indicator, so I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. The visibility indicator is the normal range of your enemy's vision around you. This can be reduced while you're sneaking, so enemies will have less range as indicated by the white bar. So right now it's at about 70%, which means enemies have about 70% of their normal visibility range. This is affected by two factors. First is the lighting in the area. So when you're in a lighter area or well-lit area, you'll notice that that bar is almost 100% full. But if we go into the darker areas, the shadows, or even at nighttime, you'll notice that that bar goes a lot lower. And in the darkest area, it goes down to about 50% in the beginning of the game. This is where your sneak skill actually comes into play. So while you level up the skill, the maximum level of this visibility bar will start decreasing. So at level 100 on the skill, you'll notice that it only goes up to about 80% of its total instead of 100. So as long as you're sneaking, you're gaining some benefit as you level up the skill. Also at the maximum level, the lowest it'll ever go is to about 20%. So no matter what, enemies will have some visibility while you're nearby. This is also affected by the enemy's vision cone, which is a frontal vision cone. And enemies can also hear noises around you, so if you're walking around, enemies can hear you quite easily. This brings us to the next section, which is the visibility indicator in the middle of your screen. This indicator looks like a crosshair right now, but there's three different levels to this. The first is the flat line as it looks right now, which means you're completely undetected. The second level is what you see now, which is the partially opened eye, and this means enemies have detected you, but they're still unaware where you're at. You'll also notice that the enemy has a yellow icon that looks like kind of like a Wi-Fi signal above their head, which means that they're there, they are aware of you, but they're not completely alerted. The last level is whenever the eye turns completely full, and that means enemies are completely aware of your presence, and then they get a indicator which looks like the red exclamation point above their head right now. So that's the three levels of the visibility indicator, and there's a few more things to talk about with being undetected, so we'll go over that now. One of the main benefits of being able to sneak is to be able to backstab your enemies. Backstab is a damage bonus applied as long as an enemy is unaware of your presence. So if you can sneak up in melee range and be able to get behind the enemy, then you can backstab the enemy, which deals a lot more damage. The backstab bonus is applied anytime things are unaware, so you don't actually have to be behind the enemy, but they cannot notice your presence at all, which means you can use things like the bow and target things from a long range away, and as long as enemies don't notice you, you'll still get the backstab bonus. There is one other thing though, that enemies do have a invulnerability timer or a backstab immune timer for about 5 minutes after their backstab. So if an enemy is able to survive your first shot, you will need to be able to fight them normally, and you won't get the additional bonus from backstabbing. The backstab bonus is indicated by each of the different weapons, and you'll notice that most weapons at this point have around 3 times more damage whenever you benefit from the backstab bonus. The next mechanic to talk about is blocking. Blocking is a way to prevent damage to the player, but some damage will still leak through. There are a few things to know about blocking, and the first is the blocking skill itself. Every time you level up blocking, it will reduce the amount of damage you take while blocking. I believe it's 0.5% for every level in blocking that you have, so it is well worth it to level this skill up. The next thing is anytime you block, it does require some stamina. So if your stamina is completely drained, you won't actually be able to block the enemies and will take full damage. The next thing is any damage that does leak through while blocking fills up a bar that is indicated on the right hand side of the character, and this is a stagger bar. The stagger bar can be filled up either from physical damage or from lightning damage. This is really important as the first boss in the game is a lightning deer, so it can stagger you. If you happen to be staggered, you will take 2 times more damage than normal, so this is a really important thing to pay attention to. The last thing is that any damage that does leak through from blocking is then reduced by your armor value, so it is still important to have decent gear while you're fighting the higher level enemies. So let's go ahead and take out the skeleton now and take a look at our weapons. You'll notice that all of your weapons and shields will have a block armor value. Even things like the torch and the bow has a block armor value, but it is a lot lower than what the shield has. So you can block using pretty much any weapon in the game. However, I really recommend having a shield, as most weapons early game are one-handed, which means you can reduce your damage by a lot just by building a shield and using it during combat. So one of the next things we can talk about is also in the line of blocking, but it's actually parrying, and this is more about timing your blocks. So instead of just holding the shield down and waiting for the block, you actually want to time your block to be right when the skeleton swings at you. And that will generate a couple things for you. One is it doubles the amount of block armor that your weapon has, and the second is it makes the enemy be staggered. So you can actually deal more damage to the enemy when you parry them. You'll see they kind of have that funny little dance for a second there after they swing at you. And this is really a skill that you kind of have to learn to be able to block or to parry consistently. But keep in mind that whenever you are fighting these skeletons or the other enemies throughout the game, is that the blocking and parrying do both have penalties, that they either cost stamina or they fill up the stagger bar. So if the enemies are too strong for the gear that you have, it still can damage you, so you do need to be prepared for that. So we'll go ahead and take out the skeleton, and we'll look at the different weapons for a second here. On the weapon, you'll notice that most weapons in the game have a parry bonus. This indicates that that weapon can be used to parry. However, you'll notice on like the tower shields, they don't have a parry bonus. So these weapons can't be used to parry, but they have a higher block armor, so their blocking is more effective that way. But you can parry with just using a sword as well. But keep in mind that the parry bonus is a multiplier of your block armor. So if I was to parry just using a sword, I'm only getting 12 times the 2, so 24 block armor. However, if I can parry with my shield, then I'm getting the 28 block armor times the 2.5 times parry bonus, and I'm blocking, you know, like 70 damage that way. One other mechanic that I think is important to mention, as it's not widely known, is most of the weapons after the early game have a secondary attack function. So for example, the mace does a basic swing attack and it does decent damage. However, if you can use the power attack, which is by default the middle mouse button, it does a lot more damage if you can actually hit the enemy with it. So you can see it does quite a bit more damage there. Another option is things like the spear. The secondary attack is a ranged throw ability. The negative to the spear is you do have to run and chase down your spear wherever you throw it. So you can miss the enemy and now you don't have a weapon to use unless you have more than one weapon with you. There's one last mechanic that I think is really important, and I personally played the game about 300 hours without realizing it was a thing, and that is you can dodge attacks from the enemies. And this acts just like you are just moving out of the way of the enemy. It does cost some stamina, but it is a quicker movement, and during the dodge itself, it does create an invulnerability frame. So even if the enemy actually hits you with their attack, you don't actually take any damage during that dodge movement. So it's a great way to avoid damage. It does cost stamina still, but there's no chance of being staggered with it, and it's just a complete ignoring the damage during that block. The next thing to mention is actually the damage types that your weapons deal. So if you look at the different types of weapons, you'll notice that things like swords and axes have slash damage, and then your maces have blunt damage. And later in the game, you'll also have access to different types of elemental damage, such as fire, poison, or frost. And these are important to keep track of, as different enemies are weak to different types of damages, and they also have a resistance to a certain type of damage as well. So a big example for this would be the troll in the Black Forest is really weak to pierce damage, but is very strong against blunt damage. So in the Black Forest, you really want to be carrying around a spear or a bow and arrow, as these are both good pierce damage options. However, on the same note, different enemies such as skeletons in the Black Forest are weak to the blunt damage and a lot more resistant to the slash damage. So I recommend having multiple different types of weapons as you move throughout the game, and this will help you be a lot more effective in how much damage you deal to your enemies. One other thing to mention is making sure that you have your food buffs on and active, and different foods will give you different amounts of health and stamina, and I'll have a lot more information about this in a food guide that's coming out soon. And I just wanted to mention that you're going to need to find a balance between how much health and how much stamina you have, and this may change at different points in the game. So keep in mind that any of your block, dodge, your stealth abilities all require stamina to use, and when you're fighting, using your different weapons will also consume stamina. So it's important to find the balance that works for you to make this most effective. And one last big tip to talk about is the meads that you can make throughout the game. So early game, it'll be things like your poison resist meads and your minor healing and minor stamina meads. Later in the game, you'll have access to the frost resistance and fire resistance barley wine. So each of these have different effects that can be very useful depending on the zone that you're in. And I recommend that you grab some poison resist meads before you head to the swamp. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this type of content, and a huge shout out to our Patreon members that support the work we do. Thank you from all of us here at Nocturne Gaming. If you would like to become a patron and get some added benefits, check out the link in the description. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, please leave them down below for me, and we'll see you next time.